Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's your favorite president. I don't even need to introduce myself because by now you should know me, unless I'm gaining new listeners, which I believe I am. As usual, I just want to start by saying thank you to all my listeners and thank you for everyone who has downloaded my podcasts and my episodes, 15 in total. I am releasing these things like someone who has just discovered sex or in a war shooting jokes. So I want to thank you immensely. I am so proud of you. I'm proud of the fact that a number of you are listening to the podcast. And it's not like I have a league table, but one of the things about podcasting, because I'm relatively new to it, is you constantly check the analytics, which is the how many downloads you're getting and which countries and so on and so forth. Right now, if I had to do a chart, a league table, Ola Onabule is top on the charts in terms of number of podcasts that have been downloaded. And I say this because I'm not putting my future guests under pressure, but he's top on the list at the bit. But I think I might actually put you under pressure that you have to beat Ona Boulay because he's top at the moment. He's number one in terms of number of downloads. I am currently in England, and I have to say to you, the weather is shit. It is extremely shit. I woke up this morning preparing for the podcast and I looked outside my presidential palace and it was raining cats, dogs, and fish. I say fish because what's happening right now is Britain still hasn't got his oven ready deal. I think he should have called it a fridge deal because he likes hiding in the fridge. And I hear they now have gunboats, and considering that I am an army officer, uh, it's shit. It's literally shit that you are using guns, boats to protect fish. And it's just made me realize that maybe it's time for me to actually leave this country, but I shall miss the fish and chips. I need to go back to Baghdad. I've had enough of this miserable weather. Now they're saying they're fighting over fish. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, with no further ado, I want to introduce you to my next guest. He is based in Egypt, and he's one of my many Middle East friends. His name is Saif A.K, comedian, and we met. Wow, I think we met well over uh, probably about 10 years ago, if not more or less, uh, 11 years ago, if not more or less, or maybe 9 years ago. But we met on social media.
7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, 7 or 8 years ago. And we met on social media. We met on Instagram. And we've been communicating ever since. I call him my Egyptian Laughter Republic ambassador. And he has no choice but to accept that. And we did a recording at the very first lockdown in April, I believe, April, May. And I've only just released the short clip of what is a very fantastic recording. We were just having some banter and trying to deal with the lockdown isolation of it all at the time because it was relatively new. He is a fantastic comic. I know he had plans to book me and to bring me to Egypt until General COVID arrived and messed up plans. So I am really pleased to welcome my next guest, Saif A.K, comedian. How are you, Saif?
Peace, assalamu alaikum to your listeners. Peace be upon you. And Mr. President, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to do work with you on anything and in any way capacity, except in a British member of parliament type of way where it involves, those balls and the whips and the chains and the people's rights out the window. I was just gonna the thing with the boats, the patrol boats, the gunboats. I can't believe we've reached the stage in history where we're asking the Navy, the Royal Navy, to not patrol the waters for drug dealers and human trafficking. No, 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 no. French fishermen, that's the real threat to British security. Not terrorists, fishermen stealing English cod. And what is it that makes cod English or French? I always thought that they were Terran, that fish carry Terran passports or oceanic passports. It's ridiculous. I looked it up on the Guardian's website. There was an article about that the British government are planning on, because apparently the British coastal waters are up to 200 miles off the English coast, which is ridiculous because the coastal difference between, like in the English Channel, between England and France is 21 miles. So does that mean that, you know, 100, French people are going to be like, allez, allez, mes enfants, means come, my children. Allez, les Anglais arrivez, les Anglais arrivez. The English are arriving. Et vous, tous les poissons de la vie de la maison. They want to have the fish from our houses. Are English fishermen boats in the Royal Navy going to send like old World War II hurricanes to patrol the skies across the French Riviera? I don't understand. It's stupidity. I mean, but then again, that is what happens when you get the DNA of Donald Trump, the DNA of Nigel Farage, and a couple of sperm cells of Adolf Hitler. Put it into a cocktail mixer, pour it into a laboratory, and you get Boris Johnson. But like, no, seriously, I don't know. I mean, this thing over fishing and fishermen's rights, it's ridiculous.
When it started, this is one of the reasons why I get really frustrated that I'm not in power and I'm not running the country. I thought maybe perhaps in terms of the deal, the problem is the fish. So why can't you add chips to it and give the
Yeah,
Europeans chips, fish and chips,
like a
and
trade-off.
like a trade-off.
Yeah, we
I,
consume so many chips. Just give them chips.
just give them chips. I know they have their own, and they call it French chips or whatever it's called.
French fries.
But if I was in power, safe, I will, because capitalism is a failure, as we can see, it's corrupt. So why don't you trade by barter? That's what you need to do. Trade by barter. Forget all
Not
the money,
barter,
but
batter.
yes,
I like
barter.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, barter by batter.
Babata, not butter. But thank
No,
you,
no, I know.
thank you for joining me for that podcast. I want to get to know you before we talk to the listeners about the subject that I have demanded that you
I'm
talk
a
about.
Sagittarius. I like long walks on the beach.
Yeah, but you said you seem to have you. So you're from Egypt. You were born in Egypt.
Well, no, no. I'm half my heritage is Egyptian and Iraqi, and on the Iraqi side, it's also got Kurdish blood from my mimo, as the Americans call them, or my nana. My grandmother is Kurdish from Kurdistan. I was born in Saudi Arabia, and when I was big enough or old enough to be carried in the luggage, the family moved to the UK. And I lived in London for 30 years, as you can hear from my strong British accent. You'd think I grew up in Knightsbridge or Putney or, First Avenue or Jersey. Um, and then I moved back here to Egypt in 2008, and I've been here ever since, making
Wow,
adjustments.
what a
Yeah.
combination! Saudi Arabia, Kurdish, Egypt.
Well, Saudi Arabia only in terms of where I was born. I don't have any citizenship or any allegiance,
But
nor would I want.
you have seen the world, and wow,
As much as I can see during my life, yeah, I've been blessed that way.
yeah.
I,
But you haven't been profiled, have you? As someone who
oh
travels a
God, of
lot.
course I have. Of course I have. Many years ago when I was at university in Britain, I made the Depends on your point of view. Some could say it was a mistake. Some could say it was a genius move on my part. I applied to work for MI5 and twice, and I got rejected twice from MI5.
We know why now. We know why he got rejected.
Well, I'm pretty sure they looked at my mobile phone history and they were like, no, 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 no. He'll betray state secrets for an ounce of weed. And I was like, how dare you? At least 3 ounces of weed. Then I'll sell the secrets. But
Yeah.
yeah.
You
Uh,
also you also have an American accent. Well, sounds
well, thank you.
American.
I've been told I have what's known as a television accent or a East Coast accent or an accent from Atlanta or Georgia, not Russian Georgia next to, Ukraine and all those dirty
So
bomb
you've got it
manufacturing.
all. Yes.
I have it all, yeah. Duh.
What's the comedy scene like in Egypt?
Um, that is an interesting question, Mr. President, because a few years back, and we have to go back to like 2004, there was no comedy scene until yours truly did a comedy night here in a little town called Agami. That's Agami, which is 18 kilometers west of Alexandria. It's like a summery town, like where everyone comes in the summer. And then Axis of Evil, which was Ahmed, Maz Jabrani, and Dean Obadiah, they came in the winter of 2007 and did some "Do you think you're funny? Come make us laugh" competitions for budding stand-up comedians here in Egypt. And back then, up until maybe 2013, 2014, there were a couple of English-speaking comedians in Egypt, but right now, as far as I know, I'm pretty much the main only English-speaking comedian. And because of COVID, general COVID, that can we swear on your podcast or you'd prefer not to? General COVID, that real a-hole, destroyed the live industry here in Alexandria. But there is still a circuit in Cairo. There's several Egyptian-based and Arabic-speaking promoters, bookers for stand-up comedy in Egypt. I myself used to run Ronin Comedy, and Ronin Comedy is kind of sabbatical at the moment because nobody's opening their venues for gigs because of COVID.
Yeah.
And the ones that are focusing on their Arabic-speaking audiences, and I focus on English-speaking audiences.
Okay. It's really interesting. Yeah, general COVID has done quite a lot all over so many countries, and in some countries they now have gigs where it's all saturated. You know, it's reduced. Tell
Saturated and
me,
sanitized.
tell me more about this. Why was there a change from English speaking comedians to Arabic
Well,
comedians?
there was always both. We always had both in the circuit, but the English speaking comedians one by one started to emigrate out of Egypt. There was one comedian by the name of Rami Borai. He's Egyptian Canadian heritage, was here in Egypt for a while, and then he emigrated to the Emirates, to Dubai. There was the white Sudani, Omar Ramzi, who was an English speaking act. He also emigrated to Dubai. Um, the thing is that the economy in Egypt, it's always super fluctuating. It's ups, downs, inflated prices, never deflated prices, lack of petrol, increase in petrol. So there's like all these different factors that push the English speaking acts that I know to emigrate. Also, there are a couple of comedians that do both. They're bilingual. They do Arabic material and they do English material. And they found that they were focusing more on their Arabic speaking audiences because Arabic is their first language. Me, Arabic is my third language. So
Okay.
for me, it makes sense to just stick to English because that's my
Okay,
first language.
cool. So that do you believe that there is opportunity for English speaking people like me to come to Egypt and perform.
Absolutely. I was in touch with several venues that were very interested. One venue in particular here in Egypt called The Tap, which is a chain of bar restaurants. They have a beautiful stage. There's a branch, the Tap West, which is in an area of Cairo called 6th of October. There's Tap East, which is in Tagammo Khamis. Then they have Tap in Maadi. Maadi is an area inside Cairo. And then they have Tap North, which is along the north coast on the beach communities, and they were very interested in booking English speaking acts. And I told them about I was going to bring English speaking acts this year, and this was the meetings I had in February.
Yeah,
And then general COVID blitzkrieged everyone's plans in March. I
yeah,
mean, literally, the Germans are like, Germans are waking up in their graves going, was ist das? Das ist ein Blitzkrieg 2.0, 2.0, ja, 2.0, 2. Blitzkrieg 2.0.
yeah. Got
So,
it. Yeah.
in case any of your listeners or viewers don't understand German.
Okay,
Um,
and go on.
no, no, and there were a lot of venues really, really interested in the idea, but then as soon as COVID happened and everybody started like a 500 seater is now a 250 seater, a 50 seater is a 25 seater. So everything has now been reduced to allow social distancing. But what's really crazy and funny is that venues, places where the general public go in and out of, they're doing their best, and the government are doing their best. But there's just so many dumb people out there, like as you see on Facebook feeds, and you see on YouTube channels and Instagram and on social media generally, you're going to get people that are like, I don't need to wear a mask. I don't need to take a vaccine. I don't need to stick something up my ass just because the government says so. You got all these dumbass people who suddenly they never went to medical school. They never did scientific research, but they know more than scientists and doctors. Never did any medical research, but they know more than medical people. They know more than scientists, even though they have no degree. Some of them didn't even finish school, but they know more. But anyway, the same amount of stupidity you see on social media in the West. Here in Egypt, you'll see sometimes a lot of people, they'll be wearing their masks like this. So instead of like, that, they'll be doing this. Like loads of people just walking around going, Sometimes you'll see a lot of women and a lot of guys just be like, "Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. How are you? I'm good. How are you?" They're all doing this kind of like, petri dish existence, and I just stay home. I
You
just
know,
stay home, and
that's the best way. That's the best way.
that's
Let's
the only
talk.
way.
Let's talk about your. I love what's behind you and
All these windows.
these windows. You're not talking to me from the mosque, are you? Is this your home?
Allahu Akbar, Allah. La, not now, Sheikh. I'm in the middle of a Zoom conference. Do you mind? No, these windows, believe it or not, are handcrafted from
Wow.
a special marketplace. Like every one of these little pieces, all of them are handcrafted by hand. And this was done in a marketplace of Cairo called Khan Khalili. Khan Khalili is where you would go to get like this kind of work, handcrafted work,
Yeah.
specialist jobs, jewelry, uh, just all the kind of things that take skill and finesse to make. And I remember going with my father and my mother to the workshop where the guy was making all of these windows. There are
Mhm,
11 of them
mhm.
here. I'll try just for the moment, just to show you and your viewers exactly what I'm talking about. So there's one, two, three, four
Wow.
fuse box, five,
Mhm.
six, seven, eight, nine, 10, 11. So like those windows, actually, those windows there are very different to these, and those two windows, and those two windows are very different to these windows right here.
Okay.
But it is a lovely. I'm planning on selling the house and emigrating back to the UK, and I'm planning on unscrewing and removing these windows all and bringing them with me to the UK.
Well,
Just have
we
to find
will.
a window big enough in a UK house
In the
to.
UK house, and apart from that, I'm sure the immigration people will want to make sure you vaccinated the windows. Depending on
That
what
I
time.
vaccinated the windows and I haven't like tried to smuggle heroin
Yeah, I just have to.
syringes.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing for those who are listening to this. It's going to be on YouTube, so you'll be able to see the windows that Saif was showing us. But if you're downloading it, you won't be able to see the windows, so you will
which
just
is a
have to,
good re-
which you
which is
just
a
have
good
to.
reason for your listeners, go watch the YouTube video to see the
Yeah, go watch the YouTube video. Also, just use your imagination because it's just such a very, it's just such
Sorry.
a very beautiful, beautiful. It is
It's
such
just
a.
like the imagination part. Like use your imagination, and you think some people are gonna have weird thoughts of like these windows handcrafted.
Yeah, exactly. Because it feels like 1 minute, it feels like when I look at the windows, feels like you're in charge. And then when I see the outfit, because you're wearing an Arabic outfit, it definitely feels like you're in a mosque. But yeah, thanks for sharing that because it's always that's the beauty of this comedy thing that I've been doing over the years,
This thing does.
meeting people from all over the world, and it's an opportunity to understand the culture, the heritage, and so on and so forth. But I think you're going to have problems bringing those windows to to the UK, and because it also depends on where you are going to live. So can you imagine going to Hemel Hampstead or somewhere outside London, bringing those windows and basically saying you want to install windows?
Tell you
It's not going to happen.
Well, to tell you the truth, even though I grew up in London for 30 years, I fell in love with Scotland in 2005 when I went for my first Fringe.
Okay.
Patrick Monahan,
Mm.
great comedian. You should get him on this.
Yeah.
We knew each other from the start, like
Yeah.
back in 2002, and
Yeah.
he invited me up to the Fringe in 2005. And actually, that's where I'm planning on moving to. I'm
Okay.
planning on emigrating to Scotland.
Yeah, but Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, Wales, unless you are going to be living in an area like maybe they have like a Bangladeshi community, maybe the windows will be okay in that part of the world, but not.
I
But we'll
don't
see.
know if you'll find windows like this because this is a very what's known as arabesque. This is a
Okay.
very arabesque art craft design, and it's very like there are certain crafts that are across all Muslim slash Arabic speaking countries, like carpet making or
Yeah.
making prayer beads
Mm.
or certain ornamental woodwork to
Mhm.
carry the Quran. But these windows in particular, this is actually very specific to Egyptians, Algerians, possibly Tunisians, possibly Moroccans. It's a very North Africa, Southern Mediterranean. So, like you would have seen in Cordoba and in south of Spain when the Islamic Empire expanded
Mm.
to the south of Spain, a lot of these kind of windows would have been present in a lot of the houses of
Okay.
the south
So
of Spain.
it's really interesting that we're still talking about the windows, and I just find it really fascinating. So for my
Windows are the key to the soul.
so for my listeners and those who might not be watching this on YouTube when it's published, the best way to describe these windows is depending on your mind, it looks like you're in jail at times. It looks like in jail, but also depending on your imagination, it looks like you're in a mosque. It looks like you're in church. So depending on how your brain is designed, and if
They are
you're
Islamic. They look Islamic. They look like you got a bunch of sheep, slaughtered them, and used the carcass to make a mesh of a prison of the soul in a mosque.
in a mosque. So look, Saif, let's move on from the windows. But that's been fascinating. Um, it's good to see you, and it's good to see you looking well. And
You say the
we
sweetest things, Mr. President.
Yeah, I know. So we what we do with this podcast, and I've demanded that you should come and talk about a particular topic, be it political, and as you know, the podcast is called "If Comedians Rule the World," and as a comedian, and we know we have comedians who have views about their respective governments, depending on where they are, even though I am trying to find comedians who live under dictatorship and to invite them to my podcast so we can have a chat about, what is it like performing comedy in under dictatorship rule? Because but
Well, Egypt is not a dictatorship. We
no,
are
it
the
isn't.
Arabic Republic of Egypt.
Yeah, definitely.
We have elections.
Yes, yes, I know you do. I know you've had revolutions that haven't been successful, but yeah, you've had quite a few. And interesting enough, when I was based in Nigeria many years ago, you had this very popular Egyptian president that I liked so much, and he and
Sadat,
yes, I
Anwar
do.
Sadat,
Yes.
assassinated I think it was 80 or
Yeah,
81 December.
I just genuinely liked him as a person. I don't know how well he was received in Egypt, but clearly
Oh
from
no, he was loved. He was definitely loved by many Egyptians. Um, the rumors go that in Egypt, some people thought that Sadat was a traitor to the Arabs because he made a peace treaty with Israel
yeah,
after I think it was the 1973, because there were two wars between Egypt and Israel,
hmm
and he was at a peace treaty that was overseen by Jimmy Carter, the American president back then. Then he was assassinated, and then we had Hosni Mubarak for 30 years. I mean, it takes longer to build a pyramid, but anyway, um, at least pyramids are more fun to look at.
yeah.
And fun fact, there are 9 pyramids at Giza. There are 9 chunks in Toblerone, and there are 9 letters in Toblerone. Anyway, um, and then we had a revolution in 2011. We had Mohamed Morsi was elected, and then we had a revolution in July 2013, and now we have President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
So it feels like we will go into the subject that you want to talk about, but it feels like Egypt has never ever recovered from Sadat.
That's a very deep and profound statement, and I would be inclined to agree with you, because you could even say the same thing about, like, America never really recovered after November the 22nd, 1963, when JFK was assassinated.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's the same. It's the same for. It's really interesting what we are talking about. That we have people who are. By the way, I just believe that the world is suffering from a lack of leadership. That what the world has at the moment, at least career politicians who are just there to enable themselves rather than enable their people. But if you look at history, where you have prominent leaders who have made an impact, once they disappear, you know, Sadat, Nkrumah, so many of
Prime
them,
Minister Bhutto,
Bhutto, the
Gandhi.
Libyan president, It's as if those, yeah,
Gaddafi.
it's as if those countries never ever recover because those people made, rightly or wrongly, made a lot of changes in the country. And it's the same. It's the same with what we're facing in the United Kingdom. Like it or not, she was hated, but Margaret Thatcher, rightly or
Margaret
wrongly,
Margaret Thatcher hated by many because you have to be cruel to be kind, and
yeah,
she
yeah.
ruled with an iron fist.
But what I'm basically saying is that the country has never ever recovered since she left. And then you had Tony Blair. Those who,
No,
so
you had
look,
John Major, then you had Tony Blair.
yeah, 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 I know. But what I'm saying is that those that you see as leaders who are making the difference, or rightly or wrongly, once they are out of office. So Labour Party has never ever recovered from Tony Blair. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm.
The Conservative Party have never ever recovered from Margaret Thatcher. But look, it's just really fascinating. I wasn't planning to talk about assassinations, but it's profound.
It is it's
Profound.
profound, and it's what's funny is like I take for example Lebanon had a prime minister, Rafiq Hariri, and he was assassinated. Now, what a lot of people don't know about Rafiq Hariri is that Lebanon went through a civil war, as everyone knows. And Lebanon, Beirut in particular, was devastated by this war. This war lasted anywhere between 10 and 20 years, depending which historian you ask. Some people think it even lasted 30 years because it was a war between Muslims, Christians, Dirzi, Ba'ath, which are the political party that existed in Iraq and in Syria, which is some kind of extension of communism and socialism. I'm not 100% sure. Um, he basically got all the top contractors and engineers, sat them in a room, and asked them all how long would it take to rebuild Beirut to as it was before the war, like the infrastructure, airports, ports, everything. How long would it take you all? What would you need? And he said, on the contractors all said, we need about 5 or 6 years. He goes, you have 3 years. You have 3 years. And Rafiq Hariri paid for it out of his own pocket.
Wow, he was that rich.
He had managed his finances so much. And also another thing people don't know about him was that at the same time he financed the PhDs of multiple Lebanese students.
Wow.
So in other words, he really focused on the future. And what do we always do in history when anyone ever comes and says, hey, everyone, I know the world is all crappy. I want to make it better. Kill that man. He
Yeah.
wants to make people happy. It's what they do. It's what they do. But back to your podcast subject, if comedians ruled the world, for starters, I get rid of all secret societies, but that's just a different thing for a different podcast if we want to see light of day. Um, I think one thing I would love to change is the cleanliness and our approach to the ecosystem. Like
You mean
it
climate
pains me.
change? Yeah.
I mean, like the way we're treating the coral reef, or the way we're treating nature, the way we believe that we humans have the right to eat something and then throw the wrapper of it on the floor. Like that basically God was up there many millions of years ago going, because he had a computer back then. You know, as I design the human beings, let's see, we're gonna make them this, we're gonna make them that. Oh, Gabriel, can you get me the reckless, uncaring prick genome off the shelf? Yeah, you'll find it next to the Hitler prototypes. Can you pass me that? Thank you. This is very blasphemous, I know. Making humans not care. And, like they literally, human beings don't give a damn about the environment. And there's always this sort of like, well, it's not going to bother me. I'm going to be dead in X amount of years. Yeah, but future generations are gonna go through the plow of your greed and your stupidity. So I think if I could change one thing, it would be the environment. To make everybody more environment friendly, like to not throw their garbage willy nilly. I mean, I've posted it on my Instagram several times about how I have all the neighbors up and down the street and where I live, they will walk 30, 40, 100 meters to in front of my house and dump their garbage, not in a bin, just on the ground. Then later on, a couple hours later, some heroin junkie guy that drives a three-wheeler motorbike will bring his motorbike, go through all the garbage, opening all the bags and like literally shaking all the bags empty, looking for cans and plastic that he can go and then sell so he can get his heroin hit for his next hit, because heroin is more important than the environment. So like, and that's what I deal with like on a daily basis.
Then can I just interrupt you, if I
Please.
may, in terms of
Oh,
the environment? Because obviously I agree with you, and I feel that at times that people need to take personal responsibility for their
mm,
actions. Feel that at times people don't have a conscience. You see people walking on the street, they drink something and then they just drop it on the floor. Clearly, what is not working is people are not. So I know in some countries they could fine people for litter, for example, and at times that's not working. What would you do differently if all these what I call weak laws don't work? Why don't can't we decide to just shoot people for litter, like the stuff that happens in your house?
funny you should say that, because I don't know if it was RoboCop 2 or 3 when they tried to reprogram Murphy, and instead of his three directives, they added all these different directives, and you know, like one of them was like no littering, and there was some guy who was lighting a cigarette, and
Mhm,
suddenly RoboCop pulls out his gun and shoots bullets all around the guy who was about to light a cigarette. The
mhm,
cigarette drops to the ground and he goes, "Thank you for not smoking."
mhm.
It's like, so it's interesting. I like the idea of shooting people for
But I
littering.
just think that some of these laws are just very, very weak. People ignore them, and this softly approach, this democratic way of it's almost like you want to put it to vote uh, whether you should drop litter or not drop litter. It just really annoys me. But I like the
Isn't
idea of
it
the
strange? I
environment.
think it was in London where if you're caught littering, you get fined on the spot. Like, I don't know.
That doesn't happen. I don't think in
No, but
London.
here's the weird thing. But if you're busking or begging outside of a station, they will charge you three, four times as much.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Maybe spot fines. May not even just spot fines. I would actually go as far as saying people should, individuals should stop people and challenge people when they
They do
do
that
things.
in Switzerland. They
Yeah.
do that. Different countries have approaches. Like if you go to Japan, I went to Japan in 2002, and in Japan, like how we today now have like, a bin for paper, a bin for plastic, a bin for aluminium, a bin for non-recyclable now in 2020 now. Whereas in 2002, 18 years ago, the Japanese, on every single, like wherever you would have a bin to collect the garbage, they had it separated. Take it one step further. The Japanese, a lot of them love to smoke. So what do the Japanese do? They add ashtrays to every lamppost. Like there are ashtrays all over
Wow.
the place, so you don't throw your cigarette butts. Scotland started to get super strict with the people that were, because like there are a lot of smokers in Scotland. Oh, I just throw the cigarettes like a jobby. Just throw it on the ground, no bother. They just like throw those cigarettes and they don't care. But now what the Scottish councils are doing are they're sending these little vans with 360-degree vision cameras on the roof of these vans.
Mhm.
And if they see one person throw a cigarette, it's an on the spot £50 fine. And that was in 2014.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is a case of like, you know what? If we're all talking about this softly, I mean, like, I feel like sometimes governments want to focus on the bullshit. And I'm sorry for swearing, but it is bullshit. Like, governments want to prefer to focus and get you all outraged on bullshit and not important issues. Like, for example, back to your question, if I ruled the world, what would I do differently? I believe 100%, and this might, some of your listeners and viewers might agree with this. Some of them might disagree with it. Those that agree are enablers. That don't agree, I mean. I believe that racism and rape, not in the same category, obviously, as crimes go, but I believe 100% that racist groups and any individual caught, convicted, and proven to be a rapist should get the death penalty.
Wow.
That's just my opinion. And I know there's always going to be that softly, no, you can't kill people because if you kill people, two wrongs don't make a right. And, you know, you have to you have to reproach and rehabilitate people. No, that's fucking bullshit. Tell you what term we don't have in Arabic? Repeat offenders. Because the Saudis, they execute rapists.
Yeah. That's is touches on the subject. You know what? It touches on the subject of this American who recently was executed. I think he's called Brandon. I can't remember the son name, but don't you believe that when people commit crimes like murder, for example, that they could be remorseful over a number of years and repent? That's point number one. Point number two, don't you also believe that what if you get it absolutely wrong? What if it's the wrong person that you are sentencing to death and there's a case of mistaken identity or there's something else? How do you tackle those issues? Well, and I just before you said that, Saif, I know that some people will find it interesting that I am not going straight and saying I support the death penalty as a dictator because I am benevolent.
You're the first dictator that doesn't support the death penalty.
I'm the first because I have seen mistakes made. I have seen people being executed wrongly, and one part of me, and I think I blame the fact that I have spent a lot of time in the West, so I think the democratic principles have at times clouds my judgment. But on a serious note, you know, those points that I have made, can you address them?
Of course I can. And I'll tell you, first off, as a Muslim, being raised a Muslim, but being raised a Muslim in a Western country, so obviously I don't walk around the streets of London, you know, going, Sharia law, you know, no, of course not, you know, like, but in Sharia law, there are three possible consequences of murder, which are to be decided by the victim's family. So hypothetically, if Joe Bloggs killed the daughter of somebody, and it's still in the early stages of the crime investigation, forensics, etc. And you're absolutely right. It is very possible to make mistakes, wrongful convictions. You hear about it all the time. It's a ghastly, it is a horrible consequence in society when evidence is not gathered and you don't have beyond a reasonable doubt. You have concrete 100%, but you're not 100%. Anyway, the three consequences are either to be decided by the victim's family is either forgiveness. They can take the family of the victim can turn around and say, we forgive him. We forgive her. Demand financial compensation, which is obviously something that would be decided by the courts, not like they wouldn't go, we want $100,000 for the death of our dog, because how do you put a price tag on someone's life? And the third consequence is the death penalty. If they feel, no, we can't forgive, money is not going to take away the pain, how dare you kill? An eye for an eye. And it's very interesting because I make a joke a lot about me being 27 in years of age, even though I have 50 shades of gray beard. But I was born the same year that America decided to bring back the death penalty. And since the return of the death penalty, 1976, in case your viewers or listeners are wondering, there have been around over 8,000 executions since. Now that sounds like it might not be a lot, but again, the mindset of what goes on, and it's a very, it's obviously, you know, to decide in society who gets to live, who gets to die, who gets to continue, who gets to thrive, you know, who gets to exist, who gets to it's a very, it can be a tricky subject, obviously. I mean, and some people are going, and how dare you put racism and rape on? Well, I'll address those two subjects on a different matter. In terms of rape, maybe, you know, it's the comedian in me that thinks racism should be punishable by death. I don't think it should be punishable by death, realistically. I think a racist should spend time. I think, like, if somebody is a white supremacist, they should be sent to Africa. They should be sent to an African country for 11 years. Spend time in different African countries, African cultures, to get over their ignorance. Because, believe it or not, in my youth, I would be around other Arabs, and there's a well-known stereotype that Arabs hate Jews, Jews hate Arabs, Arabs hate Christians, Christians don't mind Arabs. No, that's complete bullshit, because in every group, denomination, whatever your race, religion, creed, or whatever, you're going to have some kind of prejudices. But in my youth, I would be around people that exhibited bias and prejudice towards people of a Jewish heritage. And it took me moving to Egypt to realize how absurd, how insane, and how stupid racism is. I used to be a teacher, a history teacher. And one day I came into my class and found, because we were covering Germany, the rise of Germany, and they were ninth graders, so the average age is 14.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody had drawn a swastika on the front desk in pencil, which means that they're not they don't have like convictions of their racism. They're sort of like, I'm a racist, but I'm going to do it in pencil so I can like rub it away if I change my mind. You know, so they drew a swastika, and I asked the class, who drew the swastika?
Yeah.
Dead silence. Who drew the swastika? Dead silence. And then I turned around and said, okay, FYI, all of you, your great grandparents would have been next on the train.
Yeah.
You know, so it's seeing that kind of stupidity, that kind of racial bigotry in my home country, it broke my heart, because it's sort of like when you're in, it'd be like anyone, this is a crazy analogy, but it'd be like some white American that isn't necessarily but prejudiced or biased towards African Americans,
Yeah.
but he has got his biases, but he doesn't make it outspoken.
Yeah.
Then he goes and spends time deep in the heart of Ku Klux Klan County, you know, deep in the heart of the Mississippi, deep in the heart of Alabama, deep in the heart of where people are like, we don't like your kind, you know, like one of those places. They would learn to overcome their own biases and prejudices.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to say concrete with a clear conscience about the death penalty. I mean, it's a very salacious and seditious statement to make, you know, that, oh, I think everyone, but I mean, when you look at people that are victims or survivors of sexual assault or sexual rape, they are changed forever. And I honestly, you know, like, I mean, one term you don't hear in Arabic, because there is no Arabic word for it, is repeat offender.
Mm.
A guy in Britain goes out, rapes a 70-year-old grandmother, kills her, gets like X amount of years in jail. And then I get people telling me, oh, you've never spent time in a British prison, mate. You don't know what a British prison is like, innit, you know? Be like, dude, I might not have been in a prison, but I can imagine that a prison is not a great place to live in.
Yeah. My view, Saif, in terms of rape, is that they should be castrated.
Yeah, but then you see, this is the thing about the castration part, and it's funny you should say that because other people say the same. And then I always say, yeah, but the most dangerous organ in a rapist is not necessarily between their legs, it's between their ears, because that is
Castrate.
where,
Take the ears off.
no, lobotomize them. Obviously, a lobotomy.
Mm,
Do an old school lobotomy where they don't remember and they don't
mm,
know,
mm,
because
mm.
the decision to rape is one thing, but then some of those rapists that have been castrated might turn around and then go to darker urges and become a serial killer.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, castration is one way, chemical castration is another.
Yeah.
But I just think, why go through the hassle of trying to rehabilitate someone who's been chemically or physically castrated? Just fucking kill them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just kill rapists. It might be harsh, it might be strong, but any of your listeners or viewers that have been survivors or victims of sexual assault will be like,
Yeah.
like it's horrible.
Yeah. Okay. So we've spoken about climate change. You've covered what you would do
Racism,
about
rape.
racism. You've covered what you would do about rape as well.
Yeah.
So you've covered
Happy subjects.
happy subjects, three happy subjects that you have touched on in terms of if you were in charge of ruling the world. Are there any others that you thought about?
One thing, if I could do, and I would start in Egypt with this, is the removal of car horns.
Oh, well, we have, um, we don't particularly have that problem, unless they are driving gigs. I say
Yeah,
we, I say we because I've spent so much time in England. Can't wait to go back to Baghdad, to be honest with you. But yeah,
in Baghdad we don't have drive-in. At least we have convertibles so that we can all get COVID.
yeah, 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 we can all get COVID. Yes. Why car horns? What's wrong with car horns?
Um, Anyone who's ever been to Egypt will tell you that the cacophony of noise that you hear from the car horns, it, to quote my mother, it really beats on the nerves.
Yeah,
Because, put it this way, I don't know if in Baghdad or in Britain there are languages and phrases that have been invented on the car horn.
yeah,
But here in Egypt, we have invented car horn language. Like we have swearing, we have all kinds of. It's just noise. It's unnecessary noise.
yeah,
People like I'll give you a great example. In the UK on the highway code book, it's illegal to honk your horn from 11 p.m. to
yeah,
7 a.m.
yeah,
And the only time you're allowed to legally honk your horn is in fog, at a zebra crossing, or if you're on a bend, if you're on like driving around a bend, so that another person, if you may or may not know if there's another driver coming at you. Here in Egypt, it is literally language. It is
yeah,
literally sort of like, you feel like drivers have one hand on the steering wheel, one hand on the gear stick, and then a third robotic hand that just does this the whole way through. It's like as soon as they turn the ignition, they're like, let me make sure the car horn is working. Yep. Okay. You know, like how pilots in World War II, they'd be like, contact, bombardier to bombardier general, checking the engines, checking left rudder, checking the right rudder, checking the tail rudder, checking machine guns. Bombardier, we are clear for takeoff. In Egypt, you were like, bombardier, steering left work, left indicator work, right indicator work, car horn works. You know, it's like it's like they're addicted to honking the horn.
yeah. Well, don't you think? Because there's a view that, certainly my view is that we should just get rid of cars and go back to where we were before these cars were
Horses?
invented. Yes, horses, ships, goats.
I think it'll be a lot cheaper to take care of horses. I mean, on a cold morning, you don't have, you won't have to warm them up too much. It's your body temperature. If you're riding the horse,
Yeah.
that warms up that horse. You can give them blankets, you know. I think actually, I like the idea of returning to horse-drawn carriages and chariots and just getting all like literally like oh, look at that guy, number 22, he's got a Roman chariot, he's liking the antique style,
Mm,
isn't it,
mm,
and get Victorian style. I like that idea of going back to horse drawn carriages.
mm,
I mean, like literally cars are just, I mean, on the one hand they're great, they have benefits, they have benefited society and the terms of transportation and interconnectivity and everything, but at the same time, I mean, okay, I was going to say you can't kill yourself with a horse, but in a way you kind of can, because if a horse steps on you, you're kind of crushed.
You know what you were talking about? We're talking about horses as a way of just replacing cars, but that means that there'll be no longer be any dogging, no more dogging. No more car
Actually,
dogging.
there will be dogging watching the horses.
Okay,
Become
look.
like, there will be like, and then you get those Thai sex shows that love to involve a donkey and a woman.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Saif, I've got good news for you. The good news is that you have broken the record in terms of
time.
guests who have spoken for so long. So that's a
I'm
good.
number one. The bad news is I'm going to have to cut a lot of this.
Now, the bad news is, and it's not bad news actually. I should have told you that I don't edit any of this. I just put it out there, so there's nothing that is going to be cut out in any shape or form. So don't worry about that, because
I'm sure when you get,
I'm doing my best to practice freedom of speech. And as far as I'm concerned, freedom of speech is just let people say what they want to say. Don't cut anything out, because people need to hear. That's my understanding of freedom of speech. Don't edit anything. Just let them say what they have to say. So there's no editing. So it's just to say that you have spoken the longest, and that is, I value your time.
Mr. President, thank you. I know that if anyone makes it the distance and watches the whole podcast, then you've got a diehard fan. If anyone listens to this and they've reached this point in life, the secret of life and happiness is to be good to other people and not be a prick.
But it's interesting you say that, because never really given it any thought in terms of how long people would want to listen to a podcast. I genuinely believe that if the conversation is
Riveting.
riveting and interesting, and it's subjects that they want to hear, then they will stay as long as it takes, depending on where they are. Some might be watching or listening to this whilst they're driving on the road. So if they've got a long journey, they will listen to it. If not, they know what happens if they don't.
And now they've reached it here. Now we will talk about the mating rituals of the cricket.
Of the crickets, or they might be cooking. It depends. But it's always a pleasure to have guests who want to talk about specific subjects, and it's always a pleasure to know that there are people downloading and listening to this podcast. So I would say that it's been such a very interesting conversation I've had with you for well over an hour. We've spoken about Windows. I've learned a lot about Windows. We've spoken about international politics. We've touched on Middle East
assassinations.
With assassinations. We've spoken about what we should do about rape, cars, climate change, and racism. So we've covered
everything except the kitchen sink.
Except the kitchen sink. So I'd like to thank you immensely for finding the time and spending quality time with me today. One final word from you before I end this abruptly, which is what I normally do as a dictator?
Well, I'll be doing my own podcast soon, which you are going to be hopefully my second guest on, called Backstage.
Second guess is not good enough. I should always be first. Make sure you don't
Well, you'll
make that
definitely be my
mistake.
first. You'll be my first dictator. That is for sure.
Okay.
It's just because of scheduling. I mean, unless you're able to see me tonight, then you'll be my first. But basically, it's called Backstage Chronicles, and it's going to be comedians talking about the life behind the stage, writing gags, interacting with audiences after a show, before a show, and other pursuits of projects of creativity. So it's should be interesting. I've never done a podcast with others before, so it should be interesting.
Well, you could use this as an example. Just don't copy my bad habits, if there are any.
I don't think you have any bad habits, except being based in the UK.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm out of it soon.
Yeah, well, I'm actually hoping to be back there myself.
Out of it, I'll be taking some fish with me.
Just disguise yourself as a French fisherman and they'll just deport you right
I'm just
away.
so pitchy. Look, it's been fantastic. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care of those windows. They are lovely windows. I have fallen in love with those windows. They look really nice. And like I said, take care of yourself, and we'll catch up soon. That's the end of my podcast. This is episode 16. We are churning them out like we're at war with Europe. I hope you've enjoyed this episode.
Extra long.
Extra long, but
extra crispy.
Extra crispy, and good, really good discussion. Really good discussion. And
I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And what we haven't explored is the fact that apart from the fact that Saif is a comedian, he's also a very great impressionist, as you can see.
It comes to my attention that I still demand the elections be a recount because I'm the most amazing president, other than my esteemed guest and host for having me. I mean, if I was doing podcasts, they'd be very much like this, probably be better, probably be in the Oval Office while I can still do them there.
Guys, on that note, thank you so much. See you soon. Bye.